Instead, we are much more focused on things like why and what. And as a result of all of this, roadmaps tend to be much more customer centric. Hello, welcome. Hopefully, you can hear me all okay. Uh, there's a little bit of delay between the stream and the comments flowing through. So, I'm going to talk a little bit and let the comments flow through. Keen to take you through this webinar. Some news on this one. So, you are all legends and amazing because we beat last month's webinar numbers. So we had just shy of 400 on. I think we had 300 and above 350, I think it was, for last month's webinar. We've hit, last time I looked just before I started up this stream, we're at 419 registrations. So pretty awesome to see that. It's good to see anybody online. If you can let me know if you can hear me in the comments, is always useful. But yeah, we're going to talk about roadmaps today, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. I've got a little bit of content I want to go through. We'll go through that, and then I want to kind of answer your questions. And I've got some, I guess, some survey type things in here as well to try and get some polls going, because I'm curious about how you use roadmaps and getting some data on that. So it should be interesting. On this point, whilst everyone is still joining and I can see the number going up, just a little bit about me. And for those who haven't been to a previous live stream, sometimes I have a little bit of a discrepancy between the comments coming through on like LinkedIn and X/Twitter. Doesn't always feed through to StreamYard. So if I miss one of your comments, I apologize. What I always do is I go back through the comments afterwards. I'll go through and I will answer you, promise that. And if I haven't, feel free to DM me and we can make that happen. About me, for those that don't know me, I am Ant. I'm a product coach. I'm the founder of Product Pathways. A little bit more on that in a second. But as a product coach, I work with companies and product teams and product managers all over the world. I help them do product better. I have a newsletter which I ramble on about things to do with product, business, and leadership, which is known as the PBL newsletter. And yeah, I have my cat in here. He's meant to be sleeping and I can see him moving. So I'm worried he's going to like jump on the table or something. So if he does, everyone say hi to Socks. A bit about Product Pathways. So Product Pathways is my new kind of focus thing. Product Pathways is all about, when I started being a product coach, it was all about trying to help other people. I kind of realized or came to this moment in my career where I thought the most impact that I can have is actually helping other product people and product teams and companies do product better, help that transfer to your products, people like you, that then can transfer to your customers, myself, my son, my family, my friends, and everyone ends up using some of your products. I've had the privilege to work with companies where I am a customer of them, which is awesome. Awesome to help those teams make a product better that I use. So it's all about that. It's all about making that more accessible. That's why I'm running these free webinars. I've got a whole YouTube channel. I'm trying to create as much free content as possible. But to complement the free content, I also have online courses. So at the moment, there's 4 online courses, but I'm going to do more. I want to kind of build it out to be a community that's a low-cost community and can really help people do product better. So enough on that. Let's talk about roadmaps. But before we get into that, I'm curious to hear where everybody is. So let's see if this works. I have a QR code up on the screen, and maybe I'll switch this view so it's a bit bigger. Not that one. That's not going to work. Go this one. So I had a QR code up on the screen. You can also go to polyv.com/ a very long word because that's the way polyv works. When you get onto it, you'll see a map. I'm curious to see where everyone is joining from. So we've got we have 200 people on live at the moment. So I'm curious to see where everyone is joining from. So if you can do the QR code or go to the link, actually, I'll even drop the link in the comments too. So hopefully you can just click on that as well. Although that's going to be very delayed for you. Or maybe it'll be quick because of the delay. It'll come up before I say it even. I got some coming through. I'm going to start to zoom out. So hopefully everyone's got the link and hopefully the QR code still works if I zoom out here. I know that we're not going to have a lot of people in America, if any. I'm curious to see if any, because it's an ungodly hour for them. Last month's webinar was US time zones, and all of you Europe folk missed out. So I'm gonna flick between the two. Definitely think we're gonna see a hotspot like along here, and obviously missing the US. But yeah, we'll keep that QR code in case anyone needs to scan it as well. Whoop. Oh, it just said we got full on activity is full. Maybe because I have a limit on responses. Do we cap that? So apologies if we just hit the cap and it won't let you respond. If you throw it in the comments, I'll love to see it. If you haven't if you couldn't, we got somebody down the south of Africa. That's amazing. New Zealand, cool. Apologies. I wonder if the other surveys are going to work because we hit the cap. So we'll see. We'll manage that as we go through. But awesome. Okay, let's get back to it. Alrighty. Thanks everyone join in. Apologies, we hit the cap there. So let's roll into the rest. And I've got some other questions, and we might hit the cap again on those ones. That is probably cause for me to go and work out why we hit the cap and actually go and solve that for next month's webinar. So yeah, I'll do that. Awesome. I can see them coming through in the comments too. So I appreciate that. We're going to go through a few things. Like I said, I've got some content, and I'm really keen to do some Q&A. I'm really keen to hear from you as well. We're going to talk about roadmaps. We're going to talk about an age-old question of plans versus roadmaps. We're going to talk about timelines on the roadmaps, controversial. So we'll talk about the pros and cons, do or don't. We'll talk about making a shift as well. Like if you feel like you're stuck in a place where you are working on a roadmap or in a place where you can't move away from timelines roadmaps, we'll talk about that. And let's talk about how you can try and make some of these shifts. And of course, we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions as well. So cool. Let's get into the content. I want to start with, some of you probably saw this meme. To full credit to Atlassian, though, I will say this. I put this meme together, and then I actually went onto their website, and they've actually updated this. So, like, for those who've been using Jira for a while, we'll see this as familiar as Jira roadmaps or advanced roadmaps. And full credit to them, they've actually updated that now that they've released Jira Discovery, and they call it a plan, not a roadmap. So that's been updated. And now they point you to Jira Discovery, which uses the now, next, later, and has some of these roadmap principles. So full credit to them. I probably can't use this meme too much anymore now that they've changed that. But I want to start here because often in companies, when we look at roadmaps, they look like this. They don't look too dissimilar from a project plan, Microsoft project, all that type of stuff. And, someone who has worked with a lot of companies and helped them try and become more product, adopt the product model and be more product led, I empathize with them because they've come from a project background. And, it's maybe for some of you out there, this is probably speaks to some of your stakeholders that you're dealing with. They come from a project background and they're just kind of dealing with what they know, right? So they go, oh, roadmap, I know how to do that. And then they just make it look very similar to their project plans. And unfortunately, if we focus on that, then nothing has really changed, right? We're really just doing projects still, and we haven't really made these shifts. But this is often the status quo in a lot of places and companies, and I empathize with them. So I'm not trying to say like it's right or wrong. I want to talk a bit about making shifts away from it and why it's so important to also shift away from this. So to kick this off, I want to talk about just kind of baseline here, re-baseline our understanding of roadmaps and plans. And this is my perception on it, how the mental models I've developed around this, this is my perspective. I don't really say that this is the only way to think about this, but this is how I interpret the two of them. So if you think about it this way, roadmaps tend to be detailed, but they're not micro, right? They're not a low level of detail. Plans tend to be a low level of detail. And if you think about why plans are low levels of details, And that's often because we need to deal with things like, if you think about things like dependencies, right? Um, Really bad handwriting. But we need to deal with things like dependencies. We've got coordination and sequencing and all that type of stuff, which means we need to get to a low level of detail when we are planning, right? So a plan is the output of the activity known as planning. We do planning all the time. Whether we turn that into an official plan or not, we do planning, right? So when we think about planning, then we do need to be much more concerned with like how and when type things, right? Especially when we're dealing with things like dependencies and all that. But when we're not planning and we're building out a roadmap and we're trying to take, and blue's going to be a bad color here, we try and take a long-term horizon and we want to be flexible, then we want to actually steer away from those things. Because when we start to define how and when, we go into solution mode to begin with, which means we miss the ability to have things like opportunities and goals and outcomes on our roadmaps. More on that in a minute. It stops us from being able to be iterative and flexible because now we're starting to talk about when. And we don't really need those things for a roadmap. I'll talk a bit more about what a roadmap is and define that more clearly in a second. Instead, we are much more focused on things like why and what. And as a result of all of this, roadmaps tend to be much more customer centric. They tend to be more outcome focused. And plans tend to be more internal focused. So, like, our customers don't care too much about our plans. There's a caveat to that because, like, B2B software space in particular, sometimes they do care about our plans because we need to do integrations, all that type of stuff. But that's, for the majority of people, we don't care too much about that. Therefore, it is much more internal focused. Our customers don't care too much about it. We care about it, right? Like, we care about our plans. We care about planning. It's more internal focused and it's also more output focused. We are looking at, like, again, the how and the what, like the how and the when. We're looking at what output teams are delivering so we can manage things like dependencies. We can do planning, all that type of stuff. As opposed to roadmaps, which are much more customer centric. And again, as a result of all of that, plans are a planning tool and then roadmaps are a communication tool. So you can think of these two as one's going to be more more external focused, not facing, although you can have public roadmaps. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's going to be more external focused. It's going to be more customer focused as a result of it. Your roadmap should have a customer lens to it. And it should be more outcome lens as well, outcome centric, versus so plan can be more internal, more output focused, more focused on the how and the when, and using it as a planning tool. And then, as I said, a roadmap, therefore, is a communication tool. So for me to just put a definition around product roadmaps, this is how I frame it. So to bring it down to its bare bones, a product roadmap is a tool that we use in order to communicate the future direction of a product, of our product, really. Now, the question then becomes, why do we need to communicate the future direction? Well, sometimes we need to communicate the future direction, particularly to our stakeholders, right? Because we are within a larger ecosystem and there's stakeholders are people who have an invested interest in our thing. Stakeholders can also be our customers and users. And as a result of all that, they care about the future direction of the product and they care about having this communicated to them. So it's important for us to be able to communicate that. It probably should go without any saying, a product roadmap should be based on our strategy, and our strategy should be based on our vision, which means that our product roadmap, another reason why we need to or want to communicate it and we want to communicate the future direction, is we are also communicating to a degree how we are realizing our strategy. And that's important because people, especially our stakeholders, I should say, some stakeholders are going to care about those things, right? I'm just reading some of the comments coming through. And this is why I want to start here too. And I just sort of comment too, like, this is important because I want to start with, like, let's start with first principles, thinking about roadmaps, why we have it, all that type of stuff. And then tools and everything comes later, because then we can start to think about what format we should put our roadmaps in, which leads me into the next thing, which is, if this is a tool to communicate and it's a tool that we use particularly to communicate with our stakeholders, then it is not uncommon for us to have multiple, I don't want to say multiple roadmaps, although they're basically multiple or different lenses or different versions, different formats of our product roadmap, because there's different audiences are going to need different types of information. So one simple example of that is the one at the top there, which is, executives. They shouldn't be concerned. Not that they aren't always concerned, but they shouldn't be concerned in the low level detail of things. They should be focused much more high level. So we're going to play back a higher level of detail. We're going to play back, the and like the big rocks. We're going to play back the outcomes that we're chasing, the opportunities that we're chasing, and we're not going to get down to that fine level of detail. Equally, marketing is going to have a certain lens, or anything market facing. It's not just marketing. This could be sales, depending on your organization. It could be customer success. It could be marketing. It could be etc. But any market facing role, they're going to care about something different, because they're caring more about, how am I going to sell this thing? How am I going to communicate this thing? How am I going to, support this thing? So they care much more about the customer side, the outcome side. And they care about when, but probably more on like the launch thing. But we can give that to them via plans. And then the team is going to have something much more detailed, because they're down at a lower level of detail there. So on this point, this is also not to say that it's like an either or, right? So like roadmaps versus plans is not an either or. It's not like you have roadmaps and you don't have plans, or you have plans and you don't have roadmaps. You can have both, right? That's an important distinction too. We have a roadmap and we do planning as an activity. My cat now wants to get outside, so I need to open the door. I knew that was going to happen. It's like I start talking, and I knew it was going to wake up. So at least he didn't jump on the desk, but we all could have said hi to him anyways. So what I'm getting at here too is like we have a roadmap, and our roadmap should be, so if you think about this too, your roadmap should be an input into planning. And we do planning all the time. We do potentially annual plans, depending on your company, although I think annual is a bit, much. We do quarterly planning, right? Like most of us do quarterly planning. Our roadmap should be an input into that quarterly plan. And we do a plan, and whether we actually come out with a actual physical document that is a plan or not, it doesn't matter. We still do plan in as an activity, and a roadmap is an input into that activity. Curious about the comments. We'll get time to it at the end as well. I'm trying to keep an eye on it as I talk, in case there's anything I can talk about right now in the moment. So these are some key things, right? So it's not an either or. You still need to have plans. You still need to do planning. We still need to do release planning. We still need to do, quarterly planning. But again, if we go back to here, that is a lower level detail. We're getting much more focused on breaking the work down. How are we going to do this? When are we actually going to try to deliver it? We start to make things a little bit more static. We're less flexible. And that's okay, because we're at a finite thing. And a roadmap's at a longer level. Now, just to go a little bit further on this, before we do, I want to go back to this poll. So if anyone still has the poll open, and let's see if it's going to work. I hope it's not going to tell me that it's full. Yeah. So hopefully you'll be able to vote on this one. We're probably going to max out the numbers as well. So I'm keen to hear here, like, do you have multiple versions of a roadmap? Anybody have that today? Who has one? Who doesn't have? Who has multiple? Yeah. And why that comes through and I have a small delay. I'm going to read some of these comments. I just read a comment by Felix. Felix, you're spot on. This is a common mistake I see in companies, where they think that if they just have this one roadmap to rule them all, they actually end up sacrificing, or at least the roadmap becomes less effective, because they've thrown everything into it. They're trying to make it a plan. They're trying to do, high level executive roadmap, as well as put all the market face and stuff, and like you think about every stakeholder, all the needs that they have. Yeah, that happens all the time. I see these roadmaps that look so confusing. Yeah, you got to target, like, again, like it's just like product, right? Like we have a target market or target customer, and we need to tailor it to that target customer so it's impactful. That, like, if you think about influence in an organization, that is a huge part of influence. If you want to increase your influence inside an organization, a lot of it is that, like, how do you make sure that you're adapting things to the different people and everything like that. So yeah. Awesome. So the majority of people have one. Not surprised to see that, because that is definitely my experience around the place. But it's cool to see like people have two, some people have three, some people have more than three. Curious to hear about them as well. If you want to throw in the comment, if anyone's keen to share like what the different versions they have and the different views they have, like that would be awesome to throw it in the chat. I think a lot of people would benefit from hearing what different lenses you have. The lenses that I have back here, they're the three that I typically have. I don't really recall a time where I had four, like more than three, but typically I would have these three. Like this is very common. This is a pretty staple one for me. Depends on the size of the organization too. Like smaller organizations, you can probably get away with like two or one. But yeah, different context. Let's talk a little bit more about roadmaps, and let's get into some of the things that make roadmaps effective. So another reason why, I kind of alluded to this when I talked about annual plans, and I was like, I don't know if like you should have an annual plan, although it depends on what lens you are putting on it, is because, and some of you might be familiar with this concept, there's a concept known as the cone of uncertainty, and I'm going to draw it backwards before anyone tells me that it's wrong and it's backwards. So the cone of uncertainty essentially says that the further, you'll see why I'm drawing it backwards. The further something is out in the future, the more uncertainty there is. Sorry, that is really bad. My handwriting is terrible today, and that's a little bit off the screen. So there's more uncertainty, even though it looks like a V. So there's more uncertainty in the future. In other words, if you were to ask me, what am I going to be doing, like, or even where am I going to be in the world on the 27th of March, 2027, that's like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, can't do math. I don't know. I mean, there's a good chance I might be like around here in Sydney, Australia, but I might not be. I could be overseas. I could be in another country. I might even move. Like I might move states or something. Like it's there's a lot of uncertainty the further you get out into the future. But if you ask me, where am I going to be tomorrow? My son has an Easter hat parade. So that's where I'm going to be tomorrow morning. And unless the car breaks down or somebody breaks a leg or ends up in hospital, I think there's a really good chance that that's exactly where I'm going to be tomorrow. Again, this means that things that are in the near term, there is less uncertainty. So there is still a slight degree, like something could happen. Who knows? Let's hope, fingers crossed, touch wood. But there's less uncertainty. So this is an important thing because like the further we get out with planning, there's more uncertainty. So roadmaps, because roadmaps are a long-term view, there's a high degree of uncertainty. And again, this is the reason why the whole, trying to put dates on things becomes very problematic. But there's a few more dimensions that comes into it. Now, if you think about the work that a team is doing, the stuff in the near term tends to be pretty concrete, right? So what I mean by that is we probably have an idea of, the work that we're doing, and it's probably at like the feature level, right? And that means we've solutioned it. It's not a problem space or an opportunity anymore. We've solutioned it. And it's probably the case for most of you, like the work that you're going to be working on next sprint or next quarter, a quarter is about to start. For those, they're going to be pretty concrete. Like it's going to be like a feature, right? Like you've worked out to a degree what you're going to build. Now, as things get out into the future, things become more murky. And we start to not have features, but we start to have like opportunities. I don't know how I'm going to solve these opportunities, but these are some opportunities that we'd like to work on in the future. And as you get further in the future, it gets even more murky. They might turn into like big problem spaces. They could even be really large goals. And a really large goal could be like, we would like to launch into the Southeast Asia market, like another market. These things would be, probably should have used a different color for it, but these things would be like, big goals that we'd like to do. So here's something else that we should be thinking about with our roadmaps. The fidelity of the work items that we have on our roadmap should also increase the uncertainty and become more flexible as we get further in the future. Put in a feature on your roadmap for Q4 of 2026 is like, it's just silly because like you don't know if you're actually going to be doing that feature then, right? And we'll talk about the dates thing in a second. What you're better off saying is like, here's a bunch of things that we're doing now. Once we've done these, we'd like to steer into these opportunities. And once we've done these opportunities, here's some like big rocks and big goals that we'd like to have in the future. And that's a really nice roadmap. Obviously, all of this should be linked to, goals, OKRs, product goals, which, should be a representation of your strategy. So everything should link that way. And these things should link to that too, which is like, once we've done these goals, here's the next ones that we'd like to do. But somebody already mentioned the now, next, later. This is when now, next, later starts to work really well, because like you can almost divide these and say the now stuff is much more concrete, the next stuff is less concrete, and the later stuff gets even more less concrete, like even more fuzzy, right? So our work fidelity should also map this. This is also good practice because if you're a team and you're doing continuous discovery, like you should be working this way anyways. Like you should be taking things as you go, doing discovery on them, validating the problem, validating the solution or working out the solution, and then kind of breaking down the work. Now, I know some of you don't work in a space where now, next, later can work, because some of you are probably like, we could never do now, next, later. Like my stakeholders would fire me. Although sometimes you'll be surprised that they won't. But an alternative, though, is an alternative to define dates. Here's an alternative to define dates. Is rather than getting really concrete, we allow our dates to also follow the same kind of pattern that our work does. In other words, we might start with like Q1, and maybe we want to go to the level of like Q2, but then we might go to like H2, so the second half. And what I'm saying here is like, we're going to work on this opportunity in the second half of the year. I don't know whether it's Q3 or Q4. Don't ask me to tell you whether it's Q3 or Q4 because we don't know enough about it yet, because we haven't even broken it down and worked out what the actual solution is, right? So now we get into the second half, and then you might just get into like, if you're doing financial years, like 25 and then beyond, or even like 2025 and beyond if you're not doing financial years. And what you're doing here is, again, those things are like, that's next year. We want to do that sometime after this year. And I know some of your stakeholders are going to be like trying to get more concrete dates, but let's be honest, even if you gave them concrete dates for next year, like you're going to be wrong because of the cone of uncertainty, because of this. You're going to be so wrong. So it's kind of like, let's just focus on the year, and you can kind of try and push them to be like, let's just stay more focused on now. Now, there might be other reasons why you need to plan that far ahead. We can talk about that in the questions, but that is another alternative, which is like, can we make the dates mirror the cone of uncertainty? So we're not saying when in the quarter, we're saying we're going to focus on it in the quarter. We're saying if everything goes well, we'll get this done this quarter, and then this stuff will happen next quarter. But things subject to change. And then further out gets even more fuzzy. It's like, well, it's next year sometime, and here's the opportunities. We don't know what the solutions are yet, and we're gonna get to that. One thing I thought about while I was just talking about that was, I have seen roadmaps, and maybe some of you do this. It'll be cool to hear if anyone does, where they have put this big red box on it that has a disclaimer that basically says this whole thing is subject to change. Now, it's a little funny that we need to do that, but some company cultures, you do need to do that. Like we need to put this big badge on it that basically says, like, this is not set in stone. It's subject to change. As we get information, learn new things, it's going to change. But sometimes that disclaimer can also just be useful. So I throw it out there as a tool that you can use. So yeah, cool. So I want to walk through an example here. This is actually from Product Board. It's an old example. It's got 2017 written on it, but it's got some elements that I like, and it's got some things that I just want to highlight. So shout out to Product Board on that. Which aligns to some of the things we're talking about. So to begin with, you can see that their dates do a similar thing to what we're just talking about. They go down to monthly. Now, I think monthly is too granular. However, if you're a really fast-paced startup, maybe monthly is not that granular, because some places a month in a startup can be like 6 months in a large organization. So that's my caveat on it. I don't like the monthly, but you can see it goes month to month, then it goes to quarters, and you can imagine quarters could go to like H2, which could then go to like, which would be 2018 and beyond. So the dates do that. The other thing I like about it is these swim lanes here. Like there's the outcome. Remember how I mentioned the outcome before? Like, what goal are you achieving? You can clearly see that all of this work links to these key results, and the outcome that they're driving towards, which is great. So that's awesome. The other things that I like about this is I wish it had more like opportunities or problems further out. But what they do is they don't, like these three box, no, not these three boxes, those two boxes. They don't really say what they're going to build. They're just saying second major thing, third major thing. We'll work it out when the time comes. So at least they've got a little bit of that. It would have been better to see some opportunities here, but that's neither here nor there. It also is balancing. I'm going to change colors here, otherwise this is going to get really confusing with one color. There's also like, whoops, this is long-term work down here. So you can see like this is like, doing very foundational work, like rebuilding the dashboard, all that type of stuff. They've also got quick wins here, which is very, short-term work. So this stuff is really short-term. And what I'm getting at is there's a balance between long-term work and short-term work, which I think is a really important thing to also think about when you're thinking about your roadmap. Like, do you have a balance between, is it all really short-term and you're just, living your life one quarter at a time? Or are you also trying to invest into the future and do something more foundational? You could argue that like the quick custom facing wins and top bugs doesn't need to be on the roadmap. It's very low level, but sometimes you want to call it out. Like what they have here, and I know I've written over it, is they've got these percentages, and the percentages are showing capacity. So you can see where the team's capacity is going, which in some organizations is actually a very useful tool to influence your stakeholders, because you're like, hey, I know you're asking for this thing, but like, by the way, we're only 10 or 15% or 60% of our capacity is actually going to it, because we're also juggling all these other things. So that can be a useful thing. Not a mandatory thing, but a useful thing. So I wanted to call out some of those things. This does a good job of aligning to the outcome, showing that the timeline can become more fuzzy. It also shows how it can look a little bit different than like a project plan. I've got some more examples that we're going to go through in a second, but I want to highlight some of those things. Cool. So let's talk about some examples. I did an article. I could throw a link to it. I could throw a link to some of the things I end up talking about here in the comments afterwards. But I did an article where I basically compiled a bunch of different roadmap formats that I've seen in the past. I have a big caveat on the timeline one. I talk about why timeline roadmaps aren't great. Jana Basto who's the CEO and founder of ProdPad, she's got a great thread on Twitter. I have it in the article about why you should avoid it. So that's a worthy read. But like we talked about the now, next, later roadmap format here, but there's other ones, right? Like you could do it via releases. And so releases is different. So you can do it via releases without giving a date. So on this example, which came from Miro, you can see that there's like V1, V1.2, V3, but there's no dates on it. So like whether this is going to take 1 quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters, like we don't know. And again, this enables that flexibility, because if you're just working towards that release, then that's the release that we're working towards. And if you think about like some of your stakeholders, especially those more customer facing stakeholders, marketing, sales, customer success, they might be more concerned with a view like this. They might be more concerned with, okay, I care more about what's in the next release. And obviously they'll love to know when, but you can help manage that. Other options is like a theme roadmap. So very similar to what you just saw, that example I just went through. You essentially have themes down the side, and then the work aligns to the theme. This also has releases up here and some dates. I don't love the dates, but it's a good one to illustrate the themes. And if you could assign these to also goals, would be great as well. Sometimes goals go that way. Sometimes goals go vertically as well. Some other ones like a tree roadmap. You can create a roadmap as a tree. There's a very famous one from an Aussie bank called Upbank. It went global. Like I had people in in Europe sending it to me when the roadmap came out years ago, but they still have it, their public roadmap. But you can do like a tree diagram where the outcomes break down into the work. I think these types of roadmaps are great. You can do that like a tree one and then still do a now next later, so you can do the two together and you can make it focused on the outcome. This one's just outcome, so there's other ways to just make it focused on the outcome. So this is like we're currently focused on this outcome, and then here's the features and opportunities that align to it. Yeah, you can do it by customer journeys or user story maps, where you have your journey along the top and then you start to break it down with like now, next, later. You could do releases if you wanted to. You could do different things as well. Like this could be a goal, like outcomes as well. There's many different ways you can start to format your roadmap. So I wanted to walk you through them because I think they are useful information to know. I can link the article behind that. By no means is this an exhaustive list of roadmaps, formats. You can do many other ones. I'd be keen to hear, and this is what the next poll is. I'd be keen to hear what formats people are using and whether they are using what format they are using. And give me a second. Trying to go to the next one. So same QR code, keen to see what formats other people are using. Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're going to have to only be able to vote on one. Can I change that? Here, I'll change it. You can, is that respond? Yeah. So hopefully that changes it so you can respond multiple times. Because I know some of you are probably like, I'd use now, next, later, and a theme roadmap. So like, yeah. Awesome. Customer and user journey map ones. Nice. I don't know what just happened there. It just like changed the screen on me. Cool. Cool. Some good data. I'm not probably not. I'm probably surprised by the release one being higher than it is, but and the tree one, but that's super cool. Super cool data set. Um, yeah. And probably the customer journey one is higher than I thought it would be as well. Awesome. Um, so last thing I really had, which was more just a thing to talk about, but I'm keen to get into questions. I'm looking at the time. This comes from ProdPad. They got a whole article about like a comprehensive guide to product roadmaps. It's a worthy read. I'll find the link to and I'll throw it in the comments as well after this. But what I like about this visual is like your roadmaps is kind of centered to everything. Again, it's a communication tool, and like if you think about this, Like, obviously, we talked about it before, how your vision and strategy and your goals feed into your roadmap. But when you come up with new ideas, there's feedback that has a back and forth. Every time you prioritize, reprioritize, there's a back and forth through your roadmap. And I guess what I wanted to just say here, just because I see it as such a common pattern uh, in organizations, which is like roadmaps get really stale, or we start to question like, what's the value of a roadmap, that type of stuff. I mean, in some places, there isn't too much value in a roadmap because they're very plan driven companies. And that's probably, or well, maybe not okay, but I think it's okay that the roadmap's not valuable right now. You want to work to try and change that company. And then you can kind of come back to the roadmap. But a common thing that I see is that we just don't make our roadmaps the center of like our work. Like maybe a reflection point here is like, how often do you actually like use your roadmap, bring it out in conversations, use it? Like, do you use it in meetings? Do you use it in like sprint reviews if you do that, or showcases if you do that instead? You know, um, think about like quarterly planning, all that type of stuff, playbacks, if you do newsletters. Like, there's so many opportunities to talk about your roadmaps and bring it out. And I think we're not too. It's a common pattern I see is like just teams and product managers and just not using their roadmaps enough. They're not bringing it out in conversations. They're just not talking to it. So I wanted to put this in here because you got to remember that just having a roadmap means nothing if we can't. It's a communication tool, right? Like if we can't communicate it, we can't align people behind it. It kind of means nothing. So yeah, we got to align people and rally them behind it. So that is all I wanted to cover. Keen to look at questions, and I know there was a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and go up towards the top, and I might have answered some of these questions as well. Gonna pick some of these because I don't know which ones I might have answered. I might just, because I'm just reading your thing, Felix, as well, and I kind of mentioned it before, but just one thing about the time, just because I wanted to hone in on this one, the time spent updating, like you've got multiple views, like sometimes that is a fear, like, oh, how much time am I going to be, like, isn't it a lot of time to update these? The reality too is, if I just pull this maybe back up quickly, if you think about especially these three layers, like the high level one, because it's high level, it generally doesn't need updating that often because it's so high level, like things underneath can shuffle, but that high level, like strategic objective that we're driving towards, as an example, that still is true. And that hasn't changed. The finite details have changed. So then, like, this level has changed. And maybe this level has changed. The other thing, too, is like, it also depends on what I've often done in the past is I've just updated it when I needed to update it. So this is generally points of communication. So, if we typically, maybe I normally would have a monthly meeting with the more market facing team. So I would update that once a month. Whereas this one can be updated more frequently, although it generally doesn't change that much that I need updated more frequently. But I just update it when the need kind of arises. So it's not super, in my experience, it's less effort than we think it is. And the danger, as I mentioned before, of having that one roadmap to rule them all is that it ends up doing nothing. It tries to do everything and does nothing really good. So yeah. Um, so OKRs, yes, absolutely. You can use OKRs. Um, OKRs should be part of your roadmap, although it depends on whether you are doing OKRs. But if you are, I definitely would be. I'm not sure because I said the next comment. I don't know if that's by you because it got filtered. I know it's somebody else, but yes, you can use OKRs to bind them together. Is probably it. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question. You have a more specific question around that. Okay, here's another one. How do I align and sync them between them all? So again, I kind of just talked about it then. I generally just update it when I need to in the past. It's sometimes there are tools out there. I saw some comments from some people sharing some tools. There are tools out there that will let you have different like views and layers on it, and then they can kind of update themselves. But even if I'm using other tools with it, it's generally not that onerous to update it. And generally, I would just be kind of manually updating it and keeping it in sync myself. But it's not yeah, it's not really. And so I think maybe the caveat here is like it's not several different roadmaps, unless your question actually now I'm questioning your question. So I'll finish what I was saying. So those different views is still one roadmap. So it's easy to keep that in sync and you're just updating that. But I guess now I'm questioning myself because is your question how do I align multiple roadmaps? Like sales has their own roadmap, marketing has their own roadmap, and product has their own roadmap, and engineering, you know, I'd be crazy if they had their own roadmap, but this does happen in places. If you're in a place where there's multiple roadmaps and multiple teams, so let's just pick a few. So sales, marketing, and then you got product here. So we'll just take what you had. We can throw something else. Let's have some technical. Let's say you got a lot of tech update, like a lot of tech depth stuff, and we need to uplift that. Now, obviously, these all need to kind of be in sync with each other's, particularly yours as a product roadmap. The way that I solve this problem or try and keep things aligned is I just have regular meetings, and this is how I would divide it. So I alluded to it before. I very commonly would have a monthly meeting with the market, just said marketing, but it's just market facing teams. So whether that needs to be split between these two, and that's two meetings, or whether it's one, often it can be one because they care about the same stuff. I will come together and I will share them. I'll share with them my roadmap. I'll say, here's what's changed, here's what's coming up, all that type of stuff. I would share with them things like maybe I'm already collaborating with them on like go-to-market plans. That's meant to be a G. And those types of things. We'll talk about that, but we'll discuss all of that activity together. And what I would do is I'll try and lead by example by trying to share with them what I'm doing and what my roadmap is. And in turn, I would be asking them if they can share with me what their roadmap is, what changes have happened on their front. And if we needed to create a standing agenda or something for that, we can as well. But we will just come together on a frequent basis, typically monthly, and we will just synchronize our roadmaps together. I would then do that with other areas as well. The way it often works out to be is it only works out to be 2 to 3 forums. So you often have a market external facing forum because that's what people care about. Like there's a people who care about that. And then you tend to have an internal, more delivery focused forum. And sometimes you might have more than those two because you might have something like you might split tech, you might do delivery, and maybe you do the tech stuff separate, or maybe you do discoveries separate or design separate. It generally works out to be 2 or 3. And what I'll be doing is in those meetings, sharing my roadmap and synchronizing with them on their roadmap. So we'll actually kind of like work those things out. So let me know if that doesn't answer your question. Hopefully it does. But that's how I achieve it. If anybody has any better way of doing it too, like share it as well. But that's how I do it. I'm just going to pull this one up from Wolfgang. Yeah, it's a living document. I think this is so important. Like that's why that disclaimer. Like if you need to put it on it, like yeah. So Cornelius, to your question. So what I mean by that, it depends on your company and your context and how quickly you can go through work. In teams that can do continuous discovery and delivery very rapidly, they're generally not doing discovery cycles that are more than like 6 to 8 weeks. Like you got to be doing something pretty big to be doing discovery for that long. As a result of that, they would typically they'll be breaking the problem down into a smaller thing. They'll be doing discovery quite rapidly. And that means that we'll be doing so like if something's in the second half of the year, we generally wouldn't be starting discovery or trying to break that down. No, we wouldn't. Because we've broken down different problem spaces and we've done that more in the near term. And then we're starting to work towards that. Yes, there will come a point in time where we're in, let's say we're in Q2 and we're starting to look at things that are in the second half of the year. However, your roadmap would then be like a rolling roadmap if you're using those quarters. So I would update it to say Q2 and Q3, and then it would just be like Q4/Q1, type realm. So I'd be doing a rolling roadmap there. So as it rolls, then it would move into a new bucket, and that new bucket, that opportunity will start to get broken down. And yes, we'll start to break it down and work out solutions. So I think what I'm getting at is it's also contextual. So I guess I use the context of teams that do very short discovery cycles, can break their work down and break the problem spaces down to be smaller, and they can deliver quickly. I totally recognize that not everyone's in that space. So some people are doing 3-month discovery cycles or longer. If you are in that case, then you're right. You might be working on the stuff that's in the next one. I would then that's totally fine. It's totally fine if you got solutions in that next one because you already started to break it down. I think it just represent your time horizon would just get more stretched than that other team, if that makes sense. And that's okay. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have features if in that H2, right? Just know that your features should eventually start to turn into problem spaces and opportunities that you'll like to look at, and that you don't just have, because here's the anti-pattern. The anti-pattern is we have this 24-month roadmap that just has all solutions and features on it, and then we want to try to avoid that. Let me know if that doesn't completely answer your question, because I do recognize there's a lot of nuances in it. I'm also happy to chat offline if you want to kind of dissect that and me to try to understand your context a bit more and try and answer that a bit better. So this is a good question, actually, because like people do ask this, Peter, all the time. What's my recommendation here? Very difficult, because like there's an element of how long is a piece of string. And I'll give you some actual context there, because I hate saying, anybody who knows me, I'll never say it depends and just leave it at that. I'll always like break it down and explain it, because people did that to me and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. So if you're in a let's like take the context of like a really small startup, you let's say that you have enough cash flow for like, enough money in the bank for, you got like 6 months runway, right? Am I going to invest a huge amount of effort to try and do like a 2-year roadmap? Maybe if things are pretty clear that like, okay, this is the steps that we need to take based on our strategy, then yes, I would. But otherwise, I wouldn't, because like I'm only going to plan probably 12 months ahead. Like, I'm probably going to start to think 12 months ahead from a strategy perspective for a few reasons. Like, one, we might not exist in 6 months' time or a year's time. The second reason is, like, in a startup, it's so heavily volatile, right? I'm probably going to be more focused on the near-term stuff and then pivoting our strategy. But the flip side to that is like, take a very large organization with a mature product that has millions of users. Things are very stable. You've probably got a pretty clear idea and roadmap of things that need to happen and things that you want to do over the course of 1, 2, maybe even 3 years. So it's very contextual there. Now, where would I draw the line? I think if you've got a really, like, here's the question too. The question is like, how concrete is your strategy and how far out is your strategy? If I got a good 3-year strategy, then I'm not going any further than 3 years for my roadmap. In fact, I'm probably going 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. Now, if I've got a really, and like, strategy shouldn't be too far ahead, but if you've got like, I know where I want to go. Like we got a pretty clear, like, take like Tesla. Tesla's strategy has been like 10 years in the making. You go back to Elon Musk's blog post that he wrote back in like 2006 or something like that, ages ago. Can't remember when. But like, it was like, maybe not 2006. When would it? No, it would have been like 2006. But so he had a strategy there, and they are only just getting to the end of that strategy now that they've released the Model 3 and the Model Y. So his roadmap was really, really long, that horizon. But his context is also different. Like, he's building cars that takes a long time, takes a lot of money, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So, But his strategy was 15, 20, 25 years horizon. Therefore, a 15-year roadmap makes total sense. So that's the other question I'll be going through my head. So think about where your strategy is. Think about how your context. For most software companies, we generally have a 2-year roadmap. If you want to stake in the ground, a 2-year roadmap, sometimes 3, but take that with a grain of salt and all the context that I've said around that. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Um, do I recommend using roadmaps as a sales tool? Well, I mentioned before that I wrote an article about public roadmaps, and I'll just pull it up now. Seem to have paused for some reason. I can share this as well. There are companies, plenty of companies out there. Like, so I compiled a list. This was a while back. So this was when 2021. So like your Trello has one. There's probably all changed. Slack has one. Buffer has one. The list goes on. ProdPad has one. A lot of road mapping tools have their own public roadmap. No surprise there. GitHub has one. Your product board, another road mapping tool that's in there. Another, Unity has one. The gaming community, like Call of Duty, Fortnite, all that type of stuff, they have public roadmaps. There's the Opbank one. There's an example of it. I had it in here. So that's what it looks like for those wondering. It's a tree roadmap. So do I recommend it as like a sales and marketing tool? I think it can be an effective one, right? It's an effective one to communicate to the market, communicate to your customers. If you want to do this, like this went viral as an example. So probably less a sales tool, but more a marketing tool. But you can sell a roadmap. I don't think the whole like you can't sell like the vision and the roadmap. I don't believe that to not be true because I've done it. I've seen it happen before. Plenty of people sell, for even an example, like people will sell courses or something like that before they even created the course. So you can sell a roadmap. You can sell like this is what we're coming in the future. Do you want to get on board? And so I definitely think you can do that. And do I recommend it as a tool? I think it depends on your context. The question would become, do I believe that it's going to be effective in my context if we were to do that? But yeah. Okay, I know if you need to drop off and run, it's totally cool. I'm going to do one more, and then anybody else, I'll go through the questions and I will wrap it. But I'll go through the questions afterwards and answer them as well. Just reading some questions to make sure that I'm going to answer one that's probably going to benefit people the most. I'll touch this one just because I think it's probably more of a clarity one from Marcelo. So my take on this is you should do both. Like show the outcome that you're driving towards and show the features that you're driving towards. Obviously, on a public roadmap, maybe you don't want to broadcast to all your customers like here's the revenue targets or something like that you have. So obviously you would change that. Again, this comes back to different audience, different format for your roadmap. So tailor it to the audience. Now, internally, I think it makes total sense, particularly I think it makes sense across the board. Maybe, no, it makes sense across the board. I was going to say maybe not so much for the marketing side of the fence, but it makes sense across the board. Because here's the thing, your executives should care. That's a caveat, but your executives should care much more about the outcomes that you're driving towards than the features you're building. And I know that not everyone's in that space, but we want to work towards that. We want to work towards, again, empowered teams that have problems to solve. And if we get to that space, then the leaders should be like, I care about the outcome. Like I care way less about how you're going to actually achieve it and what features and functionalities you're going to deliver. So absolutely at that level. Now, there's an argument to say, well, maybe we don't need it too much down at the lower level for the team. But I think absolutely you do, because we want the team to care about the outcome just as much as anybody else in the organization. So I think the more we communicate the outcome, the more we align things to the outcome and we have it front and center in our roadmaps, when we're doing sprint planning and everything, right? Even sprint reviews, we should talk about this stuff. So the more we talk about it, the more we put it in front of ourselves. I think the more we start to shift the dial in the organization to care more about outcomes than output and the features and functionalities. So my take on it is you should have both. If you can start to link those things like the features to the outcomes, um, that's really the ideal thing. What you want to stay away from is like, again, and I mentioned this before, like a 2-year roadmap that is just filled with outputs, right? We might as well just turn that into a delivery plan, right? Like why are we even calling it a roadmap? We might as well just turn it into a delivery plan and deliver against it. But if we want to work in a more product way, that means focusing more on outcomes, which means we should absolutely have it in our roadmap. And there's nothing wrong with having, well, here's the features that we're delivering to help achieve that outcome. But the important part is like those things are customer centric, like we're doing these things for our customer. That's very different. Again, this is a nuance. That's very different than design this API so this other team can consume, right? Like what's the outcome? What are we driving towards? What's that thing? So I'll leave it at that. I know a few minutes over now. Thanks everyone for coming. It's been amazing. We smashed last month's numbers. There'll be another webinar next month. If you have a suggestion for a topic next month, throw it down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. In fact, I had people comment this as a topic in previous webinars. So that's how we ended up with product roadmaps today. It's also was a little bit timely because I've been doing some client work around roadmaps. So I've been having these discussions a lot with leaders and product managers and product teams. So let me know if you have a future topic in mind. Outside of that, I just can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. It's been awesome. I love the fact we all showed up, and I was really proud and happy to see that we beat last month's numbers. Let's see if we can keep the momentum going and see if we can beat next month. We won't be able to beat it every month, but that would be super cool if we can keep the momentum for a while. But that's it from me. I will go through all the comments and reply. I might not do it tonight because it's like what's tonight for me. So good morning to all the people who it's the morning, but it's late on my end. So I'll do it tomorrow for sure, sometime tomorrow. So within the next 24 to 48 hours, I'll definitely reply to any of the comments I haven't replied to. And if I miss you, like I said, don't be afraid to ping me or, at me. More than happy for you to do that. I will try to answer to it. I started this whole journey wanting to help people. That's why I want to create this content, and I reserve some of my capacity to do just that. So I'm talking enough. Have a great day wherever you are in the world. Have a good evening if it's evening. Have a good afternoon if it's afternoon. Have a good morning. The recording will go up on YouTube in the coming days for all of our US friends. Next month might be a US time zone one. I apologize in advance, but let me know the topic. And thanks heaps. I'll see ya.